Welcome to the Hillsdale Online Courses Podcast. I'm Kyle Mernon, the Director of Online Learning at Hillsdale College.
And I'm Juan, the Director of Marketing for Online Learning here at the college. And welcome back to our podcast for the Hillsdale College Online Courses. We are on to a new course today, The Real American Founding.
Yes, and in this 8-part series, we're going to examine the political theory of the American founding, right? Natural rights, equality, the law of nature, social compact. We're going to look at how the founders worked to secure those rights in concrete ways. And then I think in a very interesting way, we're going to examine how we've departed from the ideas of the founding. Teaching this course is Tom West, professor of politics here at Hillsdale College, and David Azerrad, a professor at the Van Andel Graduate School in Washington, D.C. We think there's a especially fun dynamic there because Dr. West was a teacher of Dr. Azerrad back in his days as a graduate student at the University of Dallas, actually oversaw his dissertation. And we really like that. It's this course is near and dear to my heart because I'm a student of Dr. West as well. And that is a unique experience, Juan. I know you were also a student of Dr. West. What's that experience like to be Dr. West's student?
It's very unique. I think he's probably one of the best teachers I've had. And we decided to design this course in a way that would show that to people because he is best when he is in conversation with somebody else. And that's how he manages the classroom. He's talking to students constantly and getting feedback from them. And that's why we thought that it was best to have one of his students, Dr. Azerrad, sit down with him to talk about the ideas of the founding and show Dr. West at his best in teaching one of the subjects that he is best at.
I always said that Dr. West scares me more than any professor I've ever had in my life. He's very intimidating, and it's not because he's mean or arbitrary. It's actually the opposite. I don't know of a professor that loves his students more, but he also just loves the art of teaching, and he loves getting to the bottom of things. I've never seen a professor more open to new ideas or more interested in getting to the bottom of a big question or controversy. So he never lets you get off the hook with kind of a pat answer or an easy common opinion. He always wants to analyze that and push you. And so we thought we'd give Dr. Azerrad the hard task of being part of that conversation and pulling those things out. And we think it turns into a really great product.
And I think especially this course is important because of the topic. And we talk a lot about the founding here at the college, and we think the founding is important, but it's important for a very crucial reason, and that is that the art of statesmanship, the art of guiding a society, a political society, is extremely difficult. It's not something that everybody can do. And we here at this country, in America, we have these models that that were our founders that were brilliant at it. And they did it in a way that I don't think has been done at any other point in human history. And we have Dr. West, who has studied them probably more than most people. And he can teach us then how to look at what the founders did, how they thought about politics, how they thought about the problems that they had in the nation, and then put into practice the principles that were driving them. And we can learn from them to do the same with the problems that we have in our country today.
Absolutely. And today you're going to hear episode 1. It's entitled The Political Theory of the American Founding. And you're going to get Dr. West's explanation of how can we understand what it means to have the political theory of the American founding. What was the consensus of the founders? And if you enjoyed that lecture, I hope you'll go to hillsdale.edu/course. There you'll find 40 free online courses covering a wide range of topics that are drawn from the curriculum here at Hillsdale College and taught by our best professors. I encourage you to especially check out the Real American Founding online course. There's a lot that you can gain. If you're listening to these as a podcast, you can enroll in that course, take quizzes to see if you're following along in the right way. You can open up our study guides and work through the main arguments of the course and use that as a guide. You can even pull up readings and start to see some of Dr. West's arguments from his book, The Political Theory of the American Founding, and provide some additional color and depth to his understanding and to his arguments. So I do hope that you'll check out hillsdale.edu/course, sign up for the Real American Founding, make that commitment, work through that course, and get the most out of it possible.
And one of the features that I really like in our site that you can use as you take the courses is our note taking feature. You can actually take notes of the lecture as you listen to it and then save those forever with the lecture. So go to hillsdale.edu/course. And now, as we turn to lecture 1, we're going to start by listening to Dr. Azerrad as he asks the first question to begin the dialogue with Dr. West.
So, in a nutshell, what is the political theory of the American founding?
The political theory of the founding is the idea that no human being is born with a right to rule other human beings. In other words, what man is fundamentally is an individual, and all government, all politics, if it's going to be just politics, has to be grounded in consent, and it has to promote, or at least not take away, liberty, as much as that's consistent with security, with life, with existence in a community. But then I would add to it immediately, the way the founders understood that equal right not to be ruled by anyone without consent was it was always understood that there was a moral law that limited the liberty that you have as an individual naturally. So it was this combination of the idea that man, as he exists by nature, independently of all government or all institutions, he has a right to freedom, meaning freedom from other people ruling him, dominating, but he also has a duty. He also has a basic duty to fulfill his obligations under the law, under what they call the law of nature, the laws of nature and of nature's God. So I'd say putting those two things together.
And your claim in the book is that this theory was not the only influence on the founding, but it was the authoritative one through which other traditions or theories were interpreted. So that you're not saying the only thing that shaped the thinking of Americans at the time of the founding is natural rights republicanism. You recognize that there was British common law, Christianity, but if there ever was a conflict between the natural rights teaching and what the British common law taught, natural rights would come out on top. Is that correct?
Yes. Most of the founders were Christians, or at least respected Christianity as the religion of the community. You could say the unofficial religion of the community, but it was pervasive, nearly universal. But anyway, how did they understand that? There are some scholars who like to talk about maybe the founding is to be understood as a Christian republic and with Christian principles. In a sense, that's true because of the way the founders interpreted Christianity was that insofar as Christianity has some teaching about morality and politics, it's in conformity with the law of nature and the rights of man. And that was part of what they argued, was that these principles that we know from reason alone, understanding the nature of man, also happen to be taught by our religion. Thus, there wasn't any difficulty in thinking of themselves as a Christian nation in that sense. In France, on the other hand, Christianity was interpreted very differently as a religion that justified the monarchy and justified a much more strict domination of the priesthood over the faithful. At least that was the American critique of French Catholicism. And so if that had been the prevailing religion in America, there either would not have been an American Revolution because the principles of liberty would have been seen in conflict with the principles of religion, or if there had been one, it would have been much more difficult and probably leading to violence, which is exactly what happened in France.
So this brings me to the question of the method in your book that I think is very interesting because you keep on saying the founding and the founders.
Right.
And someone could say, well, first of all, there are many founders and they disagreed about a whole bunch of things. And in some cases, their thinking evolved over time. Then you had 13 states with different constitutions. How do you determine when you survey all of and so many records? I mean, this is a founding that took place not in a mountain in a faraway place, but in public with endless recorded amounts of deliberation, public letters, private letters. How do you determine what is the founding when there's so much material with so many disagreements on the surface within the material?
Yeah, I would say in the scholarship, there tends to be three main approaches. One is, let's look at everything. Everything, private letters, public letters, speeches, footnotes, whatever. That's one. Another, let's look at the brightest ones. Let's look at the smartest founders, because they're the ones who would know the best about what this thing was really about deep down.
Jefferson, Madison, Hamilton, Franklin.
Precisely. And then my approach was, how did it all come out? That is, how do you distinguish between a private thought of Jefferson and something he put into the Declaration of Independence? And the same with all the others. Hamilton privately may have been a lot less of a Republican than he was in public. And he kind of admitted that in some private letters. Yeah, I don't think this experiment is going to work, but I'm going to do my best to prop it up. And so what mattered is what happened to the American people. What did the American people do? That was what was expressed publicly more than anything else. The documents, the public documents, they're the ones where you could really see the consensus emerging. And when I started looking at not only the Declaration of Independence, everybody looks at the Declaration of Independence, fine, everybody who studies this question. What most people don't look at is the state constitutions and even less state laws, many of which had prefaces or preambles describing, and here's what we're doing in this law and why this matters for the natural rights of man and why this is a necessary policy to preserve our rights. Often prefaces to education laws often had that character in the early American Republic at the state level, state politics. And as I began to realize that how important the state constitutions were as expressions of the common mind, the consensus mind of the founding, I also realized that most of the most interesting kinds of policy implications and discussing those, that all took place at the state level. The founders, in their capacity as people who were officials in individual states, who often had the most to say about the policy implications of their own principles. So my basic point was, why did I look for the consensus as opposed to the differences among the founders? I looked at the consensus because that's what actually happened collectively as an event. When we talk about the founding, that's a real event. It's not just hundreds and hundreds of individual events. Sure, that's there. But collectively, something happened that everyone recognized as an event. America declared independence. All these states, the states declared independence. They created a federal and they created many state governments. And that then set America on the path of being an independent nation with individual states. That was the event. What did they think was the basis of all that? That's what I wanted to clarify.
Hey, it's Scott Bertram, and I've got a challenge for you today. Become a better educated American citizen. And to help you do just that, we at Hillsdale College have our free online courses available for all who wish to learn. Our challenge? Take just one of our courses. There are so many to choose from. You can discover the beauty of the Bible in the Genesis story, study the writings of C.S. Lewis, or explore the true meaning of America in Constitution 101. We have dozens more to choose from, and all these self-paced free courses feature Hillsdale faculty and scholars, many you've heard on this podcast. So visit hillsdale.edu/course, COURSE, and pick one of the more than 30 free Hillsdale courses. I hope you'll accept my challenge. Pick whichever course you like and become a more educated citizen today. Go to hillsdale.edu/course, COURSE. That's hillsdale.edu/course.
I can think of two major objections off the top of my head to the idea that there was a consensus at the time of the founding on political theory. One is the slavery question. How can you claim that there's a consensus that all men are created equal when At the time, there are many slaveholders who are attached to slavery, and the founding does not abolish slavery. And then the second objection would be, which you discuss in the book at length, is what about the Jefferson-Hamilton famous split, which is part of the larger partisan divide in America between the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists, which points, it seems to me, to the deeper divide over, should we be a commercial republic or an agrarian one? Is the ideal American citizen going to be a merchant in a big city or a farmer in the countryside?
On the question of slavery, a great majority of the founders accepted the idea that all human beings are created equal with respect to a basic right to freedom, even the Southerners. And they said this, and there are many, you can find many statements of this claim in documents of the Southern states that had the predominant numbers of slaves. Now, as to whether that was sincere or insincere, I think one can say that most of the Southerners took the view, and this was made explicit many times over and over, they took the view that, yes, slavery is wrong, but right now we don't know what to do about it. It's too big a problem. It's too big a challenge. And that, I think, became the general view. Even at the time of the Civil War, Southern writers were looking back on the founding and saying, the trouble with the Southerners at the time of the founding was because they actually did believe in equality of black people. And that was wrong. They were wrong about that. And now we have a true South that no longer believes in that. So that was, people like John C. Calhoun criticized Jefferson. Why do we ever listen to that man? That guy talks about equality. It's wrong. We don't believe in that anymore. But he admitted they did believe it originally. And there was always some interest at the time of the founding in the states, North and South, in emancipation, either gradual or as you went farther north, sometimes you had a quicker. But I think it's worth mentioning that every state in America was a slave state in 1776. Like every state slavery was legal because that was British law. Britain was okay with slavery. And it was the Americans after the founding, after 1776, who then immediately began to think about and talk about and then eventually do something about slavery. By 1807 or so, I believe slavery was abolished in, I think, 8 states. This is from memory. In some of the states, the border states like Maryland and Delaware, vast numbers of owners of slaves just emancipated them. Slavery remained legal, but numbers of slaves diminished drastically in those 2 states.
So what you're basically saying is, at the time of the founding, there are slaves, there's the institution of slavery, but there is no political theory of slavery. There is no one who openly articulates an alternative system to natural rights that says actually some human beings do not possess natural rights. If you want to find that, you need to wait about 2 generations for Calhoun to come along in the 1830s, who is done, I guess, living in this contradiction with there's an institution, but a theory that contradicts it. How do we resolve it? Well, let's get rid of the theory.
Yeah, there were a few people at the time of the founding itself who were questioning the natural rights theory, but those were outliers. Look, the big problem with slavery, as I understand it, is that you had, first of all, you did have absolutely motives of human selfishness in play. I have a slave, and a slave works for me for free. Now it's true I have to feed him, but he doesn't run away. I've got him here. There are many conveniences to slavery, and people are normally and always going to be affected by that. It was recognized at the time, too, by the founders. Jefferson openly, yep, people are going to be very reluctant to give this up, even though it's wrong. Second point was there were legitimate questions about Black citizenship. What do we do with the slaves when they're free? Especially after 1790 or so, when the revolution in Haiti was going on, it became clear that in places where there were large numbers of Blacks, white people might all be massacred because that's what they were doing in Haiti. That frightened people. And that was all being reported in Southern newspapers. And so then again, the question is not so much is slavery wrong, but what do we do? How do we make, if we did get rid of slavery, how do we make this so it doesn't lead to massacres? Third point is, even if we didn't have the problem of violence, what about citizenship? Are these ex-slaves going to be capable of Republican citizenship? Now, later on, we're going to talk about what did the founders think it takes to be a good citizen of a free country. And then finally, there was this sort of vague belief in progress that Jefferson sometimes and other founders, well, maybe the next generation will fix it. Everybody's becoming more enlightened. Jefferson, in his more dreamy moments, I would say, would talk that way. People are going to figure this out later, and many people are becoming more enlightened. But those were great obstacles. So in spite of the fact people agreed, it was bad, there were reasons, some good, actually, from their own point of view.
Yeah, it's always, I find a difficulty teaching this to students who are, 19 years old, don't know anything. Well, why don't you just do the right thing? I mean, it's just very easy from the comfort of your armchair, eating Cheetos in class, to just do the right thing with no awareness of the historical context, the formidable obstacles that stood in the way. That's why I find when I teach the founding, more and more I want to emphasize the context to help them understand the decisions they had to make, which you can't get just from reading the Declaration of Independence.
You can't, no. One of the things that the founders were very clear on, that modern scholars often are not clear on, is that there can be a conflict of natural rights. The idea that everybody has individual natural rights, that's fine. You can say that. But what do you do in a case where, to use one of Jefferson's examples, what do you do in a case where there's a ship at sea, everybody's starving to death, and they come across another ship that has plenty? And Jefferson says they have a right under the natural law to take that property away from its rightful owners. That goes back to the old slogan, necessity knows no law. And the same thing, arguably, was true of slavery, at least in the mind of the founders. We get rid of slavery, we all die. I'll exaggerate to make the point clear. Meaning, we have a right to life. And yes, true, they have a right to liberty, but we have a right to life too. And we're the ones who are able to deny them their right to preserve ours. That, in a sense, is a legitimate argument from the founders' own point of view. People today are very uncomfortable with that idea that there can be a right to do wrong in a case of extreme necessity. But they regarded that as a sad reality, or as a fact.
So let's go back to the second objection to the idea that there's this consensus at the time of the founding, the Hamilton-Jefferson split, the agrarian republic, the commercial republic.
Yeah, the Hamilton-Jefferson quarrel, I think, again, it's one like many quarrels at the time of the founding. We tend to make too much of it, I think. But it's real. I'll say something about it. First of all, Jefferson and his fellow partisan Madison in the 1790s made a strong argument that the best kind of citizen in a free society is the independent farmer. The farmer who owns his own farm, produces what he needs for his own family, and then sells for the market only occasionally. But at the same time, Jefferson and Madison recognized that we are a commercial republic, and it's going to be a commercial republic. Their point was, with Hamilton, there's no need to hurry along economic development. We've got a nation that's predominantly of farmers now. Let's try to keep it that way as long as we can. Jefferson and Madison worried that as the nation began to industrialize, it would have large numbers of destitute poor people working at subsistence wages, crowding in big cities, as was the case in some European cities at the time. They wanted to prevent that. And reasonably. Hamilton, on the other hand, kept emphasizing, but the Europeans are out there and they're strong and we need to be strong. And part of our strength as an independent nation is we're wealthy enough to withstand them, wealthy enough to have a credible national defense and navy. In the early republic, there was hardly any money for a navy. They were constantly, American shipping was constantly being attacked by whoever, the British, the French, and the Barbary pirates. One long tale of too bad we didn't have a big enough navy to defend our shipping. So that was the quarrel, and it was in a way reasonable on both sides. And in the end, Hamilton and Jefferson they ended up agreeing on all kinds of things that scholars today tend to forget. First of all, they both agreed on the gold standard. Hamilton basically, in his report on the first coin law, adopted Jefferson's own proposal on that. Secondly, they all agreed we had to pay the debts for the Revolution. You can't go around, the country can't refuse to pay its own debts. They'll never be able to borrow money in the future. They disagreed on how it should be done, but yeah, they agreed. Third point, on the bank. Bitter quarrels existed over that, but they agreed eventually. Yeah, actually, the Bank of the United States turned out to be a pretty good idea. Jefferson did not try to get rid of it when he was president. He had every opportunity. You realize it wasn't that bad an idea. And fourth, on the question of subsidy of manufacturers, in my chapter on this, I talk about the irony that Hamilton's plan of government subsidy of manufacturers actually wasn't successful where it was tried. They had a big attempt to do that in New Jersey, the city of Paterson. But what did work was exactly the Jeffersonian system of hands-off, laissez-faire. Let each individual businessman figure it out. And that's eventually how it got going. And then finally, the War of 1812, that was a total wake-up call for Jefferson. He said, we almost lost that war because we did not have enough domestic manufacturing of arms. We outsourced our arms to Europe and then wondered why we don't have any arms here when it's time to fight the British. An object lesson for today, by the way.
One last question while we look at the big picture of the founding. Who's your favorite founder and why?
Well, I always give the same answer to that question. I don't have a favorite founder because they each had virtues and limits. I mentioned Jefferson's dreaminess. All right. But Jefferson was a great spokesman for the political thought of the founding and an eloquent Southerner who spoke very intelligently and importantly against slavery. You had people like Franklin, very interested in the idea of local self-government, local private associations, all the things that people could do to take care of their own business independently and freely of centralized government. That, too, is an important element that Jefferson paid very little attention to. Hamilton, of course, with his focus on American greatness and American national defense, he was right. You have a country that's going to be a serious nation has to be able to defend itself and protect its near abroad. It's got to be concerned about whether the Europeans are going to start colonizing Mexico and be ready to do something about that. I'm talking about now later developments, but still, it's the basic idea. And that means you've got to think about how does everything fit together to promote the kind of national strength you need as a nation to not just to survive, but to be strong, to be honorable in world affairs. So who else am I leaving out? Madison, great, wonderful guy, constitutionalism, very good at thinking through those questions. To me, it's great team effort.
So let me ask you this. Who do you think is the most overlooked or underappreciated founder, maybe a kind of a second tier member of the founding who's not one of the big guys who is worth more careful study?
Well, my two favorite founders, second tier founders would be Theophilus Parsons, who never left Massachusetts, but who was a very important politician in Massachusetts, very influential on shaping the state constitution and state law, and in ways that link it together with the political theory that all people throughout America accepted. So he's one. And then the other, Zephaniah Swift, the writer of a long legal treatise on marriage and the nature of marriage. And again, tying it together with the natural law and the natural rights of the individual, showing you how you can't think clearly about family and marriage policy unless you understand what principle you're coming from. Both of this is amazing, underappreciated. And there are many others too, but I'll stick with those.
Well, this is why people sign up for this class, because where else do you get to hear about Zephaniah Swift and Theophilus Parsons? In the next conversation, we're going to start diving into the core principles and concepts of the political theory of the American founding, equality, and rights.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Hillsdale Online Courses podcast. If you want to continue learning about America's founding or other topics, please visit hillsdale.edu/course. There you can find over 40 free online courses, including American Citizenship and Its Decline with Victor Davis Hanson, Ancient Christianity, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, and many more. The courses include additional readings, study guides, fully produced videos, and you can chat with your fellow students on a dedicated forum. Upon completing a course, you will also get a certificate. All our courses are free because we believe that a virtuous citizen is the best defense for liberty. So pursue the education necessary for freedom and happiness at hillsdale.edu/course today. That's hillsdale.edu/course. Thank you for listening.